On a clear September morning in Arlington, Virginia, the Pentagon once again became the nation's gathering place for remembrance. 24 years after the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001, the heart of America's defense establishment stood in silence, its walls carrying both scars of history and the weight of memory. President Donald Trump, joined by First Lady Melania Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, attended the annual 9/11 commemoration, marking a day that forever reshaped the United States. For the families of the nearly 3,000 victims, for survivors, for service members, and for ordinary citizens across the country, this ceremony was not merely symbolic, it was personal. As the national anthem played, the President and First Lady bowed their heads. The hush that fell over the ceremony reflected a nation still bound by grief, still determined to honor those who died. For many in attendance, the sound of the anthem carried them back to the morning of the attacks, the shock, the chaos, and the moments of quiet despair that followed. This year's observance came with added intensity. In the days leading up to the anniversary, the country was shaken by the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a conservative activist and political figure. His death resonated beyond politics, and on this solemn occasion, his name was invoked as part of a broader message of courage and sacrifice. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, standing before the crowd, captured that sentiment in heartfelt words. The life, example, and even death of Christ's follower and American patriot Charlie Kirk give me hope. Sheer courage, no matter the arena. Charlie, we love you. We know that you have heard the Lord's words. Well done, good and faithful servant. Full heart, clear eyes. Like those on September 11th, you will never be forgotten. Hegseth's tribute connected the grief of today to the grief of that day in 2001, reminding the audience that patriotism is measured not only by service, but by the willingness to sacrifice for higher ideals. By linking Kirk to the heroes of 9/11, he underscored a narrative of resilience, that even in tragedy, America finds strength. When President Trump took the podium, his tone was solemn. His words were not only for the families who lost loved ones, but for the country as a whole. The First Lady and I unite with you in sorrow. And today, as one nation, we renew our sacred vow that we will never forget September 11th, 2001. It was a familiar phrase, but one with enduring weight. Never forget has become the cornerstone of America's 9/11 memory. It is a reminder that the attacks were not just an act of terror, but a wound on the collective soul of a nation. Trump's vow reflected that continuity, an unbroken thread stretching back to the first anniversary ceremonies held at Ground Zero at Shanksville and at the Pentagon itself. But the president did not stop at remembrance. His rhetoric quickly turned from sorrow to strength. In a fiery declaration, he told the world, every enemy around the world, if you attack the United States of America, we will hunt you down and we will find you. Go all over this sometimes magnificent earth. We will crush you without mercy and we will triumph without question. That's why we named the former Department of Defense the Department of War. This was not only a tribute, it was a warning. The anniversary of 9/11 has always been about memory, but it has also been about resolve. Trump's language reflected a more aggressive posture, one that reasserted America's willingness to confront threats wherever they emerge. For some, his words offered reassurance. For others, they signaled an era of heightened confrontation. Behind the president, the Pentagon Memorial stood as a silent witness. Its benches, each dedicated to a life lost in the 2001 attack on the building, shimmered in the sunlight. For families, the memorial is sacred ground. For leaders, it is a reminder of the cost of national security. And for the nation, it symbolizes resilience, the idea that even when struck at its core, America rises. The 9/11 attacks remain the deadliest act of terrorism in U.S. history. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 slammed into the Pentagon, killing 184 people inside and on board. And at 10:03 a.m., United Flight 93 crashed in a Pennsylvania field after passengers fought back against the hijackers. In just 102 minutes, the world changed forever. Each anniversary is not only a ritual of remembrance, but a lesson in vigilance. The wars that followed, first in Afghanistan, then in Iraq, defined a generation of US foreign policy. Trillions of dollars were spent, thousands of American lives were lost, and the Middle East was reshaped. Today, those decisions are still debated, but what remains uncontested is the impact of 9/11 on America's military posture. Trump's words at the Pentagon fit within that legacy. His pledge to hunt down America's enemies echoed President George W. Bush's vow in 2001 to bring terrorists to justice. The resonance was deliberate, reminding adversaries abroad that the US remains vigilant and reminding citizens at home that the government has not forgotten its promise of protection. The presence of the First Lady added a softer touch to the day. Melania Trump, dressed in black, stood silently beside her husband throughout the ceremony. For many Americans, her demeanor represented the quiet resilience of families who carry grief year after year. Yet what made this year's observance distinct was the interplay between memory and the present political moment. Charlie Kirk's assassination just days earlier reframed the ceremony as both a remembrance of the past and a rallying point for the future. The blending of 9/11's legacy with today's political divisions highlighted how remembrance ceremonies are never just about history. They are about identity, values, and the path forward. As the ceremony drew to a close, Trump and Hegseth joined attendees in laying wreaths and bowing heads. The silence was broken only by the sound of a bugle and the faint rustle of flags in the wind. When the President and First Lady departed, the crowd lingered, many staying behind to touch the names etched in stone, to leave flowers, or simply to stand in reflection. But the significance of the day did not end at the Pentagon's gates. Across the nation, Americans gathered in schools, churches, firehouses, and city squares to mark the anniversary. In New York, the names of the nearly 3,000 victims were read aloud at Ground Zero. In Pennsylvania, families of Flight 93 remembered the passengers who fought back. And at the Pentagon, the images of Trump and Hegseth standing together joined a long line of presidents and leaders who have taken part in this ritual. For journalists covering the day, the task was to capture not only the facts, but the emotions, the blending of grief with patriotism, the intermingling of mourning with resilience. For ordinary Americans watching at home, the ceremony was a reminder of what has been lost, but also of what endures. 24 years later, the story of 9/11 is still being written. Children born after the attacks are now adults. Soldiers who fought in Afghanistan are now veterans. Families who once stood at the memorial with young children now return with grandchildren. The cycle of remembrance continues, ensuring that the phrase "never forget" is not just a slogan, but a living practice. In the end, the Pentagon ceremony of 2025 was both familiar and unique. Familiar in its ritual, the anthem, the silence, the speeches, unique in its context, the invocation of Charlie Kirk, the sharp rhetoric of President Trump, and the reminder that even as the years pass, America's enemies remain real and its unity remains tested. From Arlington to New York, from Pennsylvania to every corner of the nation, September 11th remains a day of grief, a day of memory, and above all, a day of resolve. The Pentagon, once scarred by fire and smoke, now stands rebuilt and strong, a symbol of a nation that was struck but not broken. And, as the President declared with force, every enemy around the world, if you attack the United States of America, we will hunt you down and we will find you. That vow, born out of tragedy, continues to define America's place in the world. 24 years later, the message is clear. Remembrance is not passive, it is active. It demands vigilance, unity, and the determination to protect both memory and future. On this September morning, beneath the shadow of the Pentagon, that vow was renewed once more.